Well, here we are gathered together to celebrate a remarkable achievement, 50 years of the Rochester Mineralogical Symposium. For all of you who have been part of it, I hope this talk will take you back to the places, the people, the memories, and the moments that have made Rochester special for you. And for all of you who didn't get a chance to be there in person, I hope that after this, you'll feel at least a bit as if you were there. This slide deck was put together with input and images from our past chair, Steve Chamberlain, and he is the co-author, even though I'm speaking. He's not seen the slides though, so he has no idea what I'm going to say about him. That part's on me. And just to start, I chose to adopt a couple of conventions, most important about names. Rochester has involved so many of the greats, so many of the people at the highest levels of mineral world in different respects. On paper and at the podium, we've always been formal about names. But the whole point of Rochester, as we'll discuss, was to get together, to make connections, get to know each other as colleagues and friends, regardless of our background or our place in mineral world. We introduced ourselves to one another as friends do, and I'm using the names that friends have used for one another in the halls at Rochester. I've tried hard to make sure I know what those names were, having talked to people who knew people I didn't know. But I just want to clarify, this was the tone of Rochester, and the fact I use these names here is simply to convey that. I would personally, of course, have started out by addressing many of these greats with doctor, if I were to have had the chance to meet them. A word about the photographs. There are so many. I've listed the contributors here on the title page, and a special thanks, especially to Jeff Scoville for going through all his slides and digitizing them, even working on the lighting for this presentation. A special thanks also to Willow and Quentin White, Michael and John for going through all of theirs. There are too many photos to credit everyone in print on the slide, so I've adopted the convention of crediting only mineral photographs in the standard way. And the mineral specimen photos closer to the end that are uncredited, they're just my specimens and photos, so no need. So here we go. This slide represents all 50 years. These are the program notes for every annual Rochester Mineralogical Symposium. Sorry they're so small, but it's 50 years. It represents so much, as we're going to see, so much great content. And then the people. The symposium involved so many people who are and have been important in mineral world. And I'd like to point out on this slide that there is a change starting on the left-hand side, the second cover in the second row, the yellow one. From this point on, the covers are the artwork of Susan Robinson. This was the classic back cover for the program notes. And if we were going to have standing ovations in the room, this would have been the first. 39 years of wonderful cover art for the symposium. Thank you so much, Susan. So this is what we're going to talk about today. And I'd like to focus closely on the founding idea for the symposium, because it's very important for everything else that followed. We're going to look back at a lot and celebrate what the RMS has been. We're also going to talk about two amazing symposium chairs who were the chairs for 45 years of the symposium. We'll have a brief few thoughts about the final 5 years, and we'll talk a little bit about the legacy of the Rochester Mineralogical Symposium as well. So I'd like to start here. The origin of the symposium was at Wild Acres Retreat in North Carolina. Bill Pinch and Dave Jensen were having a conversation on the porch in the fall of 1973. And the RMS was conceived as a symposium to connect amateurs and professionals. And Bill's words were, the intention was to bring together enthusiastic collectors, curators, dealers, and professionals for the purpose of sharing information. Later on, in his talk at the 25th anniversary dinner at the RMS 25, Bill would go on to say a few more things about the symposium having been a chance for collectors to meet prominent people and experts in minerals, to get a chance to talk and sometimes even help them with specimens for their research. He also talked about the fact that it had been a chance for collectors to hear the tales of some of the dealers and their adventures abroad, sometimes in less than ideal circumstances, to bring these specimens back. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and look at what the symposium has been, bearing in mind those original words about the intention. And you know, when you're asked about what the symposium is, there's a lot that goes into the answer, isn't there? It's not just speakers. And so I've set out here areas that I think have comprised the symposium, and even they do not capture everything, but I hope the full talk will. So of course, featured speakers have been highlighted. I'm going to pause again on this wonderful image from Michael. This is the one that was on the title slide. And I hope you love this one as much as I do. When I look at this, I'm back in Rochester. I'm in that room of amazing people. So much knowledge in the room, mineral heroes, mentors, and friends. Over the 50 years in this room have been the people who have written, who have edited and published the articles, papers, books, magazines, journals, you name it, that make up our world of mineral literature. The professionals who have done the research and defined the minerals we have today. The dealers who have traveled to the farthest and often dangerous reaches of the world to bring back amazing specimens. The people who have run specimen mining projects around the world. The collectors who have traveled everywhere, sometimes risking life and limb underground or in the mountains and cliffs to collect great specimens. And the curators who have worked to preserve and exhibit many of today's greatest collections. All those people in this room. I thought about how to convey that this isn't an exaggeration. This really has been a who's who of mineral world. You know, over the last 50 years, so many of the important mineral people have been in this room, and I decided the only way to do it is to see the names on screen while I talk. So I won't belabor it. I'm not going to go through talk titles, but I'd like you to see, just to see how many of these amazing people have been here. You know, among those who've spoken many times, Paul Desautels, Bob Gate, Steve Chamberlain, Charlie Key, Joe Mandarino, Rock Currier, Vince Manson, Bill Pinch, George Robinson, Skip Simmons, Van King, and so many more coming on these slides. Here's Joe Mandarino. He gave 6 talks, including in the early years on Mont Saint-Hilaire and also on the Yukon phosphate mineral occurrences. Renowned and influential mineralogist. He was the curator of mineralogy at the Royal Ontario Museum. And Paul Desautels, well, he holds the record for feature talks at Rochester with 14 on a variety of subjects, a wide variety, beginning at the very first symposium, but he spoke about crystal growth. Of course, he was the curator of mineralogy at the Smithsonian and was incredibly influential in the early days of the evolution of the world of mineral collecting. His 1968 book, The Mineral Kingdom, the last 2 chapters describe and arguably preview the foundation for much that has followed in specimen mineralogy and collecting and dealing in connoisseurship. This was the year that there was a retirement roast for Paul Desautels. And if you just look at the all-star lineup of roasters there, in the picture you can see Bill had arranged some nice attire for the team, and John White looks back fondly on this one. He says it was one of the favorite talks he ever gave anywhere. More great speakers here on a whole wide range of subjects, some about mineral localities. Mont Saint-Hilaire comes up often, but so too do many other places in all corners of the world. Some of these speakers spoke several times. On this slide, it's been recalled to me that Larry Conklin gave a wonderful talk called The Life and Times of George Kuntz, and John Sinkankas gave Emeralds and Other Barrels. Here are 2 very well-known speakers, spoke several times each. Van King and Rock Currier both gave great talks. Rock Currier also had great titles for his talks, including The Many Uses of Kaopectate and Into the Heart of Darkness. I wasn't kidding. The great names keep coming, and they're going to keep coming. A number of the speakers on this slide participated the year we had a photography workshop theme and spoke on different aspects of mineral photography, and gem photography as well. We also had talks from John Koivula, gave a great talk on inclusions in gem crystals and gemstones. There were talks from speakers here on British minerals, gem minerals, Mont Saint-Hilaire. Again, an amazing group. Another slide of great speakers and many memorable talks among this group of speakers. I think many will remember Brad Wilson's talk about collecting in the far north Arctic Canada, collecting alone, and his near-death experience with a polar bear. Dudley Blowett's travels in Asia was great. I think one of the talks that has been recalled to me most often is Ernie Schlichter's talk about collecting alpine florites by helicopter. Other highlight talks are Brian Lee's talk on the Sweet Home Mine and Georg Gebhardt's talks, including, of course, Sumeb. These are great photos. There's Fred Poe there. You know, he wrote one of the first mineral books many of us have had ever since we were kids. Peter Bancroft, the author of Gem and Crystal Treasures, which was a project with John White and the Mineralogical Record coordinating the section reviews. That is one of my favorite all-time mineral books. And of course, Jeff Scoville has literally changed what mineral world looks like. Here's Susan Robinson on the left. Can't tell if she's thinking of killing Jeff Scoville for taking this photograph. Kind of looks like it. And George Robinson, one of the main figures and contributors to all that the symposium has been throughout its history. Bill Severance, our longtime friend, generous participant in the exhibits for many years. Eric Offerman, the great Swiss mineral photographer, and my professor and mentor and friend, Bob Martin, Canadian mineralogist editor, in these pictures. More great speakers. And since I've been doing this in more or less a very rough chronological order from the time a speaker first appeared on the podium, we're getting now to more recent talks and things that we can recall maybe a little bit better. Lots of great talks among the speakers on this slide too. I certainly remember John Bett's talk on the minerals of New York City. I love Mick Cooper's talk that was Robbing the Sparry Garniture, about mineral dealers and rogues, colorful stories from the history of mineral dealing in England. I loved that talk. But many great talks, and again, just great speakers. More featured speakers who we know well, good friends. On the left is John Betts. In this photograph, he's actually making a presentation to me after I had retired as a corporate securities lawyer and become a mineral dealer. John wanted to help me out with my website. So he's holding there a sheet to show me what it looks like when you write things in all caps and with lots of exclamation marks. Also there in front of him are mineral oil. There's an egg timer to show me how long I have to take pictures. I do have that egg timer on my desk and I don't adhere to it. And there are also some screws there. I'm not going to talk about those. Three friends on the right. Remember this picture. Keep this picture in mind for a little later. John Jasak, Pete Richards, and John Rackaban. More speakers. A different three amigos on the left. Photo from Elise Skawald, and on the right, Cy and Ann Fraser. Cy spoke about quartzes many years ago, and Ann was recalling to me an instance where they had purchased 20 flats of minerals in Rochester and flown them home on the red eye, and she'd said she's never going to do anything like that again. Here we are. This is the last of 216 individual speakers at the Rochester Mineralogical Symposium in 50 years. Michael Bainbridge gave a wonderful talk about Bill Pinch and the Bill Pinch book. Peter Lichtberg gave two incredible talks, one on the chamber pegmatites of Volodorsk in Ukraine and the other on Pakistan. And I loved Les Pressmick's talk on the Red Cloud mine in Arizona. Great talks, great speakers, and that's your full list. Those last ones I mentioned are so recent that we have good photographs of them. And on the left there, you can see Peter Lichtberg is holding up in his right hand a topaz from Voladarx, and in the left a large green Heliodor beryl from Voladarsk as well. On the right hand side, Les Pressmick's talking about the red cloud. So I can only go so long in presentations without interspersing the occasional photograph of a great mineral specimen. If I don't see one, I start to get a little bit fidgety. So here's a wonderful specimen from Les Pressmick's Red Cloud Talk in Les and Paula's collection. To me, this is mineral perfection. I love that specimen. I think it's just a beauty. For many years at the symposium, it was a tradition that those who were present after whom a mineral species had been named would gather for a photograph. Not many of these photographs actually survive today, but this one here from 1979 again has impressive mineral people in it. I note that the dress code has changed a little bit. Bill's in a three-piece there, and there's quite a few ties, but it's a really super photo. Here's another one of mineral namees. Some members in common with the prior photograph, but others not, as it's a more recent photo. And here's the last one that I'm going to show of these, more recent still, and incredibly almost no overlap with the others. We have had a lot of mineral namees among our Rochester family. Just to wrap up this section, this was a nice slide that I received. We have Bob Morgan there on the left. At the far end of the table, Adriana, then Renato, then Diane and Carl, and then Kevin. The next part of the symposium I'm going to talk about is what's new in minerals and localities. What's new has been part of the symposium since the very first symposium. It's been at the core and a fundamental part of the mission of the symposium to discuss what's new. The discussions have been good all the way through from the early days straight through. It's gone through an evolution. You can see it was more of a panel, Bill Pinch and Charlie Key with other selected speakers. George Robinson and Van King led a more methodical coverage of by geography, and Jeff Scoville continued that. Now, Jeff has been leading this discussion and providing wonderful images to the Rochester Mineralogical Symposium audience for 30 years. And if there was a time for another standing ovation, this would be it. What Jeff has done has been fundamental to our enjoyment of the symposium, and we are so grateful he has come up every year to do it. You'll see on the slide as well that we evolved a What's New 2 session after Jeff, and you'll see that it went through various iterations, and you'll know that now in the last 5 years, it's been a more methodical approach led by John Betts with input from Mark Jacobson and Jim and me. This is just a quick glimpse of the room as Steve and Jeff have the technology operating and ready to go for what's new. What you really should see is the rest of the room, because this room was packed early, well before you had to get there early. You had to get your coffee very early in order to make sure that you had a decent seat. And then the room was full of oohs and ahs. And here's just a tiny glimpse of why there were so many gasps and oohs and ahs. Of course, we saw hundreds upon hundreds of photographs over the years from Jeff. Wonderful mineral specimens and just wonderful photographs. The What's New 2 session was sometimes a forum for memorable breaking news, and just a couple of quick examples. One, Victor Yount brought an anglesite to show how they were being turned into a different color. Tweesite anglesite specimens are a normal yellow color, pale or sometimes bright, but once they are dunked in bleach, and they will turn a golden red, brown, amber hue. which is quite different from what they look like when they're natural. And Victor Yount actually provided a live demonstration. Another very memorable one, I think most people will remember it vividly. Georg Gebhardt brought a presentation demonstrating a compelling case about whether or not East German wire silver specimens are naturally occurring, and his contention was that they were not, and the resulting discussion was pretty intense. On to the next section. This is a very important section. It really sets the Rochester Mineralogical Symposium apart from other events. Known as the technical session, contributed papers in specimen mineralogy, was Friday afternoon every year with 15-minute presentations of abstracts. Over the course of the symposium, these were introduced, really this was something Steve was very fond of and worked very hard on. Over the course of the symposium, we have published a total of 567 abstracts. Not all even have single authors, some are multiple authors. So a lot has gone into and come out of the technical session. Steve Chamberlain was the main driver of this technical session. Carl Francis was the host who kept everybody on time. Sarah Hansen stepped in to take the reins from Steve and has done a wonderful job and had I called her the queen of the technical session. So we had abstract reviews, of course, because before the abstracts could be finished and prepared and published in the program notes and in Rocks and Minerals, which they have been every year, they all had to go through a review process, and the reviewers are set out here. There were many great topics, great talks, great discussions in the technical session, but at 567 of them, there's no way I can even really scratch the surface. I always loved the ones that involved debunking fakes. One memorable one, for example, Jessica Siminoff used a variety of different techniques and photographs, images to prove that many Bulgarian skeletal galenas and hollowed out galenas were in fact fakes created with microscopic glass beads used as an air abrasive. When I asked Steve what he thought about the important topics or things that had come to light at the technical session, he said, you know, there've been a lot of great ones, Ray, but what really stands out for me is that it was a great forum for so many of you as younger presenters. And if you think back a few slides to the picture of the three crystal rogues, here they are in 1991, John, Pete, and John. And many of the rest of us also had our first talk beyond a very local mineral club or what have you at the Rochester Symposium. And many of the people in that list, including Caleb and Chris, have done it pretty recently and will go on to do great things in minerals, I'm sure. Another activity of the Rochester Mineralogical Symposium, which really must be mentioned, but is also beyond the scope of this talk to get into, was that the Rochester Symposium was involved in producing reprints of important historical mineral literature. Atlas to Crystal Foreman by Goldschmidt and Mineralogy of New York were two of the most prominent ones, and the publications and reprints are shown here. Another component of the Rochester Mineralogical Symposium I think we all look forward to each year were the displays, the exhibits. These were a part of the symposium from the start, and over the years involved many exhibiting institutions. I've set out here. You can see some pretty wonderful institutions would bring displays very often to be a part, and of course many collectors did as well. And it was great to look forward to, and spent many joyful times in the exhibit room. There have been so many collectors over the 50 years who have been part of this. It would be very difficult to list them all. But I wanted to give you a glimpse and a sense. There aren't a lot of great photographs because exhibits can be really tough to make look special in a photograph, but here are just two. Bill Severance brought his collection for many years. He brought specimens. John Betts always did too, both very generous and both had wonderful displays each year. the displays are really something special. I have 3 example photographs of specimens brought by collectors, which the one at the upper right is known as Copperman from Nova Scotia. The John Medici often brought a wonderful specimens, going all the way back to bringing his spruce pine quartz and pyrite combos. And Terry Heising also very often brought wonderful specimens. Not surprisingly, often they were displays of calcite. There were a few memorable things that made a splash in the exhibits over the years, and I've picked 2 examples. One predates me, and it's this one. Prosper Williams brought an entire case of these rhodochrosites, and apparently it was quite a scene, and people fell in love with the rhodochrosites, of course. And this one pictured here happens to be a Bill Pinch specimen photographed by Michael Bainbridge, and it's obviously a beautiful piece. This one does not predate me. I do remember it vividly, and it is, in my opinion, it was certainly one of my favorite mineral specimens in the world. This specimen made its public debut and its only public showing before going to the Houston Museum first in Rochester. And it's a jaw-dropping, very 3-dimensional hematite with rutile, and that the brilliance of the hematite in the middle and the 3-dimensionality of the rutile stars is unforgettable. This is now in the MIM, and Wendell Wilson kindly provided this photo. Another component of the symposium was the Micromatter's Playroom. This goes back to 1987 and forward every year with Quentin White organizing. And people would bring in their microscopes and their specimens and would discuss mineralogical issues and mysteries and specimens of interest. You can see a cast of usual suspects in this photograph. For those who don't own a microscope and have never really engaged in anything about microscopic minerals, microcollecting, I wanted to include a photograph to show just how wonderful the world of minerals is when magnified. And this is a beautiful photomicrograph by Michael Bainbridge of a goethite specimen from Marmora in Ontario. Here's another photo of the Micromatter's Playroom with more of the usual suspects. A highlight of every Rochester Symposium was the annual dinner and the fun at the annual auction. Before the annual dinner every year, we had a silent auction, and I thought no view of Rochester would be complete without that. I see in the top photograph, I can see that I can identify at least Dave Joyce, Michael Bainbridge, and Bob Morgan studying things closely. This next section, I'm going to go through the slides fairly quickly, but they're glimpses of friends from the Rochester Symposium annual dinner. I'll just note of this particular one with Bob, Marie, and Terry. They are having a good time, but to be fair to them, it looks like the caps of or the lids of most of those bottles are affixed to the top. So they are having a good time, but it may not be for the reason that the picture initially appears. More mineral friends, Les and Elsa, Peter, Rock and Dawn, Frank and Wendy, George and Bo. And more familiar faces. I particularly like the fact that Mike and Bill are spending their time at dinner looking at a rock. Many more familiar faces. Ernie and Vera came for a long time. And certainly Skip and Al have been long time contributors. Hopefully you're enjoying seeing friends in these photos. It was great to get a hold of some of them. There's a rare picture of Helen, normally not in photos. Which brings us to the annual auction, which was a great time and something I think we all looked forward to and had a lot of fun at. Bruce Gaber, Michael Bainbridge, and Carl Miller were certainly auctioneers in later years, and a good time was certainly had by all. More friends enjoying the dinner and auction. Gloria and Dave, Herwig, Paula and Jonathan. Miss seeing all you guys. Here's a great view of the room. It was a full packed event, and really everybody came. And there's Sarah with the group too in the front. See, I can't go too long without talking about a good mineral specimen. This specimen, if you look at the label, was auctioned as the first specimen at the first auction. And it was from Herbaboda and has very nice coarse crystals of prehnite for the size of the specimen. And it was acquired by Steve and Helen. It resides in their living room, so it was never cataloged as part of their collection, and it is a living room specimen instead. The highlight of the auction was the cake, and this is a tradition that went way back. It was started by Bill Pinch, and actually he said it was because the desserts were so bloody awful, he wanted people to have a chance to have a really good dessert at their table if they're willing to pay for it and raise money for the auction in the process. But as time went on, the cake took on a life of its own, so that the winning table would eat a bit of the cake and send it back up to be auctioned again, and it would sometimes get auctioned 3 and 4 times. This slide shows Michael delivering, or maybe he's advertising, half of a cake. You can see that the label that is now in my mineral collection was for a full cake, take 1, it says. And you'll see the picture in the upper corner of Carl Mineral. He describes this as one of his happiest moments ever at any mineral symposium in Rochester, and he was at almost all of them. Here's the cake in different years. Upper right, Frank and Wendy won it first time one year. On the left-hand side there, Dave won it on the first take another year. And we have a nice sequence here showing it being auctioned off and taken around to the next table afterwards. And the last part of the symposium we'll look at just quickly in glimpses was also so important. It was all the fun on the 4th floor, the dealer floor. You can see in the top photograph there, the little dealer signs for each room, and all the socializing and fun, singing of mineral songs, staying up into the wee hours, possibly drinking a beverage or two, having a great time all together with mineral friends. And you can see some here. Of course, the dealer floor had really good mineral specimens available for collectors, and I certainly have specimens, really nice specimens in my collection from Rochester. One highlight from the dealer floor early on at the 5th Rochester Symposium, the Lazard Kahn collection was sold by Gene Schlepp and Richard Kelly. And this specimen here is just one example of the spectacular things that were in that collection. That is a Hodgkinsonite. That is 11.2 centimeters, that piece. That was acquired by Bill Pinch and is now in the Canadian Museum of Nature. At upper right, I see John Betts and Michael Bainbridge discussing affairs of state, and lower left, some of the usual suspects in Gilles Hainaut's room. Here's Elise and also Dave and Gloria with a cast of friends. This is a great picture of George and Les. This is what Rochester was about. This is one of my favorite pictures of all time from the 4th floor. Dave Joyce leading us in song and mineral songs. And I've pointed out before, I just think it's so great that the lampshade is off kilter. It fits the mood in the moment very well. In a few years on the 4th floor, there was the famous topaz bowling event, where a large rounded crystal of topaz was indeed used to knock over pins. In this particular series of photographs, we see Larry Conklin at it. And here he is, the man, Carl Miller, topaz bowling. I don't know how this picture even got in here. I might note that these are the bottles outside of one room on the 4th floor. And there, for those who are looking to guess about where that might have been, I noticed there's a Barolo there, so that might give a bit of a tip. And now for something completely different. We had 2 remarkable chairs lead the symposium through the first 45 years. Putting this talk together, I thought about what kind of thank you might be appropriate to each of Bill and Steve. You know, Bill, Steve, and I all have truly loved minerals, and we've all been passionate about building our collections. And I thought perhaps a fitting tribute would be to say a few words and share just a few specimens from their collections built during their tenures chairing the symposium. Many people here today know all about Bill, so I'm going to keep this really high level, and you can read it in the points. But Bill was at Eastman Kodak, and eventually he pursued mineral interests full time. And during that time, he built the Pinch collection, which by the late 1980s was one of the finest and most important private collections ever built. It's now the Pinch collection at the Canadian Museum of Nature. As soon as that was done, not as soon as, but close, Bill started collecting again, built a second collection, also had amazing specimens. It's now at Harvard. As many of you know, and as I've just said out here briefly in this slide, the Mineralogical Association of Canada awarded the first William Pinch Medal to Bill Pinch. And it was to recognize major and sustained contributions to the advancement of mineralogy by members of the mineral collector dealer community, and is given out every couple of years. It was in Bill's honor and recognition of his enormous and selfless contributions to mineralogy through the identification of ideal specimens for study, and through his generosity in making them available to the academic community. I thought this was a nice summary. Bill was founding chair in the first year with Dave Jensen, and the fundamental principle was, as we've discussed, to bring together collectors with professionals, curators, and dealers. The content of the symposium was for collectors and professionals. He insisted upon high quality speakers. The What's New in Minerals was at the core right from the start. And the format really started in the second symposium, the Thursday to Sunday format. It went straight through until the global pandemic. How do you sum up Bill Pinch as a collector? He was brilliant and highly influential. Incredible knowledge of rare species and mineral localities. He was driven, determined, focused, loved minerals, always curious, always questioning what he was looking at. He had a rapport with curators and mineralogists. He collected minerals and mineral suites of great scientific value. He shared his collection and knowledge. He was a gracious host. And now both collections are shared widely through the Canadian Museums of Nature and Harvard University. On the left is a great picture by Steve. This really shows what mineral collectors go through. It's hard to keep those mineral areas clean, isn't it? On the right is the cover of the issue in which the Pinch collection was featured in Rockshire Minerals in 1981. And we'll look at some specimens from that part of the collection that are now in the Canadian Museum of Nature. Many of you will undoubtedly have the book, The Pinch Collection at the Canadian Museum of Nature by Michael Bainbridge. Done very recently, published by Gloria Stabler Lithography. It's a wonderful book. And these pictures are featured in the book, and they're Michael Bainbridge photographs. A beautiful gold from Breckenridge, 5.2 centimeters. Beautiful definition. One lesson that Michael and I both got from Bill in his teachings was don't overlook the common species. You know, he was so in love with the rare species, but he said, don't overlook the common species. There can be wonderful specimens of those, and Bill's collection sure had those too. It's a beautiful Galena from Cherokee County. Anhydrite may not be a rare species, but crystallized like this, it sure is. That is a wonderful specimen from Simplon Pass in Switzerland, almost 10 centimeters, really an incredible piece. Here's the famous chalcocite from Bristol, Connecticut, 11.5 centimeters with beautifully defined crystals. Just a killer. This is an andorite with a nice colorful patina on it, and nicely defined for the mineral, which is often pretty rough looking, but just a staggering size. That is 8 centimeters. One of the rare, beautiful Yeremyevites from mile 72, 3.6 centimeters. This is a remarkable specimen and wonderful for the species. This is the famous Wakabayashi light. Pretty sure this is the best in the world. That specimen is 13 centimeters. Unbelievable. The absolutely superb alamosite in the Pinch collection with little melanotekite on it as well. That is a 7 centimeter specimen of alamosite. Bill had quite a few great European classics in his collection. Here's a Swedish parasmolite, a 3 centimeter crystal. Here's one that's near and dear to all of us at the symposium. A lot of us have a soft spot for Francon and for the world's best willogonites from there. This is a 3 centimeter group of crystals, an iconic piece. This is a beautiful, sharp matlockite from the type locality in England, 2.5 centimeters, just remarkable. An old specimen, of course, historic. This is a picture by Michael of Bill, which many of us have seen, and yet it's so Bill. It's exactly Bill. He always said, look closely, use magnification, look closely. This is the second Pinch collection, which had many wonderful specimens, suites from various places. And Bill and Jackie were always very gracious hosts, and Bill was always happy to have us visit and spend time in the mineral room with him. Michael took this picture on a visit we all made to see Bill and Jackie, and Bill is patiently explaining something to me while I look under the microscope. This picture to me is exactly what Rochester was always meant to be about, the founding intention. And this is Bill with Dave Bunk and Michael and me, and we're looking at a specimen, and ideas are being exchanged and questions are being asked. And Elise took this photo. It's a great one. And Steve Chamberlain, you know, like Bill, there is no way to do justice to all Steve has done in such a short time, but I'm going to try. Steve really has 3 areas of interest and expertise. In his career, he was a PhD in neuroscience, a professor, a chair of the Department of Bioengineering, the dean of the College of Engineering and Computer Science with academic honors and military honors. He's also a mineralogist, but also a horticulturalist. He has won awards relating to mineral contributions, and I'm going to focus only on minerals here, not horticulture or hostas. Steve has authored 3 books. He's published almost 170 articles. These are only the mineral articles. He has published most of those articles in Rocks and Minerals, also the Mineralogical Record and others. He's been a consulting editor of Rocks and Minerals from 1980 until now. And here's Steve, a couple glimpses as chair of the symposium. Steve was chair of the symposium for an incredible 32 years, with additional transition years at the start. That is public service. The founding principles remained fundamental as an underpinning throughout Steve's time as chair. He actively sought amazing speakers from around the world, and he also expanded the scope of the symposium and its activities in several ways. The technical session, the contributed papers, became a major component of the symposium. What's New in Minerals developed a more comprehensive approach over time and became quite a spectacular session each year. Of course, the Microminers Playroom came in with Quentin White as well. As a collector, Steve is brilliant, prolific, generous, truly dedicated to the advancement of specimen mineralogy and public service, which is already evidenced by 32 years as chair, but he has also donated his 35,000 specimen collection to the New York State Museum. That's not a typo, 35,000. You'll have seen these words a few slides ago. Steve is a driven, determined, and focused collector who loves minerals, always curious, always questioning what he's looking at. Hallmark of a great collector. Built the Chamberlain collection as 25,000 specimens originally, including world specimens, Canadian specimens. In the 1990 he refocused, disposing of all but the New York State minerals, and then rebuilt until it was back up at 35,000 specimens of New York State minerals. Steve meticulously built a collection of great scientific value, a source of future research, no doubt, exclusively New York State minerals. Of course, he has incredible knowledge of global minerals and mineralogy beyond New York State collecting focus. And of course, he has an encyclopedic knowledge of New York State minerals. Steve is an accomplished and dedicated lifetime field collector. So I can't actually imagine a collection of 35,000 mineral specimens, but no worries, we're not going to be looking at 35,000. Here's just a handful of the wonderful specimens from the Chamberlain collection at the New York State Museum. This is a dravite from the Powers Farm, known as the Victory dravite, and it's 6.8 centimeters. While we're on the tourmalines, here's a fluorodravite, a very uncommon species from the Cream of the Valley Road occurrence, Gouverneur. It's a 4 centimeter specimen, sharp crystals. And one final tourmaline, I think this is the best known fluoruvite from the Selleck Road occurrence at West Pierpont. This is 6 centimeters, beautiful crystal. This is from the famous but short-lived find at Treasure Mountain Mine. And it's a very nice specimen, beautiful with the black scepters. Then when you look at the size, it's just shocking. It's a 9 centimeter specimen from Treasure Mountain. The classic, of course, millerite from the Sterling mine at Antwerp. It's a 4.9 centimeter field of view with wonderful sprays of crystals from the Chamberlain collection at the New York State Museum. Great piece. From the famous find of the world's best cubic magnetites at the number 4 mine at Balmat, Steve's collection contains many of these specimens. This is just one, but a beautiful one, a nice, good size at 4 centimeters, sharp, showing the modifications nicely on the crystals. Also from Balmat, from the number 3 mine, this is the best known specimen of native silver from New York State. It's 4.8 centimeters. Really neat specimen. This is a superb, deep red, sharp, lustrous, glassy sphalerite crystal on calcite from the Root Glen locality at Clinton. 6-centimeter specimen. From the Chubb Lake occurrence at Fowler, this is an amazing specimen with a nice hemisphere of bladed hematite crystals and dipyramidal quartz crystals in association. At 9 centimeters and in such amazing shape. That's a great, great specimen. It's a gorgeous twinned calcite from Balmat, but from the Hyatt mine, 3.7 centimeters across. Really, really nice specimen. Well, here's one that goes along with always looking closely and always questioning. This is an anatase crystal from the Coal Hill vein at the Rossi lead mines. 2-millimeter crystal. What a cool occurrence that is. As many of you know, I love the amphiboles, and here you go. Here's the Be My Valentine Pargasite. It's from the O'Brien farm, and that piece is 11.7 centimeters. Really neat. Here's another wonderful amphibole specimen. This is a tremolite, a beautiful green tremolite from Selleck Road, 8 centimeter specimen. Just great. Here's a gorgeous, sharp, lustrous pyrite from the Pierpont mine at Balmat. Just under 6 centimeters, nice large crystal. Very, very nice. This specimen is just wild. This is a graphite epimorph, and it is not small. It's 7.5 centimeters from Washington County. And as a final specimen, I picked the ice cream cone with the fireworks of selenite on top from Balmat, 5.5 centimeters. What a cool specimen that is. And as Steve was chair for 32 years, Helen was registrar for 32 years. Thank you both for all the great years of Rochester Mineralogical Symposium. So we've made it to the last 5 years, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on them because a lot of you have been part of it, and it's all recent memory. I just, for the completeness of the record, this is the 50 years of the symposium. So very briefly, the last 5 years, obviously you've had a Canadian as the chair, the team of Carl, Sarah, John, Dan, and Chris has been great. Also in 2019 in Rochester, Brian, Carl, Bruce, Michael, and Dan. We had great speakers in 2019. It was a wonderful symposium. We had a great time, great weekend. The three Crystal Rogues there, John, Pete, and John, and Les Presmick, Bill Severance, Chris Stefano. It was a great weekend. And then the pandemic hit and the aftermath, and we've been into the online years. You know, the pandemic hit in with lockdowns in March of 2020, and we had to scramble to figure out how we were going to keep Rochester alive. John Rackavan very kindly offered to put together an online platform. Then we were using Google Meet, and we did organize to do that. And within the first few minutes, we got into the trippy screens, which at the time felt a little bit curious, but now is just a classic view that I think makes us all laugh. John very quickly sorted it out and we got going. But this was, you know, a pioneering effort at the time. Now everybody does these things online, but at the time it was new, and we made our way through it. And it was a nice connection at a time of isolation in the early days of the global pandemic. We did raise a glass. We did sing mineral songs. We did have a good time. It wasn't the same as being in Rochester, but the spirit of Rochester was pretty great. I'm just including this one from last year, April 2022. Zoom was great. It was a great symposium. Wonder.me, I just included this to show that we here at the Rochester Symposium can manage to trip the trippy screens on any platform. And I think Don Dallaire had something to do with this one, but we got it all sorted out, all good. We've lost some pretty wonderful people in the last years, and I'm not sure if these are exactly within the band of the last 5 years, but I thought I'd put this discussion in this section. You know, I'm always scared to be missing people because I won't always know. Certainly, if you notice that we've lost someone from the Rochester community, feel free to post it on our Facebook page, of course. And I sure hope I haven't missed anybody, but everyone here is dearly missed. So we come to talking about the legacy of the symposium. You know, the symposium was awarded the Carnegie Mineralogical Award in 2011, and it honors outstanding contributions in mineralogical preservation, conservation, and education. And as a very broad brush, that is a great way to talk about the legacy of the Rochester Symposium. And it was certainly an honor to win that award. At the same time, the legacy of the symposium goes much further than this and deeper than this. And I've given it a lot of thought and just want to talk a little bit about it because I think it's important to think about the impact and how it has touched us all. If we go back to those very first words about the intention of the symposium and we think about it, the essential legacy of the symposium is exactly what was conceived. I've expanded the wording and thought a little bit about it, but here's what I would say. The symposium brought together and connected enthusiastic collectors, curators, professionals, and dealers to share, learn from one another, develop relationships, and further specimen mineralogy, mineral collecting, and mineral preservation. All the components we've talked about today have been a part of this. Featured speakers, what's new, papers, the technical session, the micromounters playroom, banquets and auctions, the displays and exhibits, the fourth floor, the dealers, all of it has been part. I would also say it's really easy to talk about these things in those broad brush generalizations without really having them sink in. I wanted to think about putting that into practice, and I can think of a couple of great examples. You know, at the symposium, we have one of the world's great mineral localities only a few hours away. And Mont Saint-Hilaire has featured from the very, very early times of the symposium all the way through. And it has featured in all places. The featured talks, contributed papers, the exhibits, the micromounts, the auction specimens, dealer specimens, the number of discussions among collectors and curators and professionals and dealers. This is exactly what the symposium was supposed to be about, and Mont Saint-Hilaire was a great example. As an aside, you know, just to show how many symposium people have been so closely tied to the wonderful things that have been discovered at Mont Saint-Hilaire, these are the names of the minerals named after just speakers of the symposium. You can see there, collectors, dealer, professionals. It's quite remarkable, really. It's a perfect example. To take that even further, one specific example about the way we've used the symposium to communicate something new and share about something new was when Les Horvath did the work to find out that many cerandites of certain habits were in fact not cerandites, but were schizolites. And that was something that we were able to discuss in What's New in Minerals and of course in the hallways as well. One other example that I can't leave out are the minerals of the Grenville Geological Province. And for those of you who are from a little bit further away or might not be familiar, there is a body of mineral deposits and geological occurrence known as the Grenville Metasedimentary Belt that is exposed in places, particularly in Ontario, Quebec, and New York State, which has produced many minerals for collectors who frequent the symposium and are part of the symposium. And in this case, again, we had features talks, we had contributed papers, exhibits, auction specimens, dealer specimens, and so many discussions. And the research is continuing today. We've had recent papers and discussions about the calcite vein dikes and the inclusions in the melt inclusions and apatites right up until last year. And that research is continuing. So it's another great example of collectors and professionals and students and everybody getting together to work on mineralogical problems and to work on specimen mineralogy together. I just want to speak a bit about one other thing I've thought a lot about over the last few weeks, and that is how to describe the legacy of the Rochester Symposium as relates to us as mineral collectors. You know, as mineral collectors, I think we all share something fundamental, and that is that we all love a beautiful mineral specimen. And that part in itself is easy. And you know, there's that moment where we look at a mineral specimen and we think to ourselves, my God, that cannot be natural. We know it is, but there's that moment of genius of these amazing mineral specimens. And we share that, we all share that. And then of course, you know, we evolve as mineral collectors. We go out and learn, we read, we have lots of different sources of information available to us. And when we come to the symposium, we are able to learn about specimens and localities, and that shapes us as collectors. We learn about a locality we didn't know about. Maybe we're interested in that for our collection, or we have something in our collection, we learn about the locality or the mineral. And now we have a totally new appreciation for that. And I use this example because of Ina's great talk last year. And of course, we learn about history, and we learn about when specimens are historic and important. And we have a much better appreciation of those. And when we see them available, we understand how rare that is or how important that is. And again, that is an important thing to understand as a collector. But there's more to it, isn't there? You know, we can learn so much from books and magazines, and they are wonderful resources. And we are living in an era of amazing publication right now. But there's more to it. We learn different things in different ways from people, and we are influenced in different ways by the people around us. So, you know, we learn from dealers what exactly came out of a given find, or we learn from the curators what are in their collections. We learn from mineralogists what minerals are known to do, and that all helps to form our understanding. When we see a specimen that is special for the species, we understand what that is. And we've done that because we've interacted with all of these people, and we've been able to assimilate all that information into our collecting. And I think that really is an important legacy of the symposium. I think it's a real impact it's had on me and on us. I think it helps us to understand to differentiate about mineral specimens and to evolve as collectors. You know, as a personal note, I've always loved crystal forms and the perfection of a crystal. And so obviously I think we all have our own taste that is personal to us. But then, you know, when you hang out with amazing friends like, you know, John White and John Rackavan and Pete Richards and Carl Francis and John Jasak, and they're all as enamored with crystals and so fascinating and interesting to talk to about crystals, that can't help but rub off on you and encourage you in certain ways and encourage you to make certain distinctions and see things you might not have seen before. And in the end, I think these connections that we've all made with one another as mineral friends at Rochester has really impacted our collections as well. So I don't know if when you think about it later on, you'll agree. But for my part, all the learning and sharing at Rochester has been really important to me as a mineral collector. And, you know, as important as all of the aspects of the legacy of the symposium are, there's one more, and the discussion wouldn't be complete without it, and that's mineral friends. Many of you I might not have got to know at all. Certainly, I would not have had the chance to get to know you the way I've had a chance to get to know so many of you and develop all these great friendships. So for that, I am truly grateful. A very important impact of the Rochester Mineralogical Symposium. So I just want to talk a minute about how we're going to preserve Rochester and its legacy in a couple of ways. I've talked a bit about YouTube before, and I put a screenshot here just to make it easier to visualize how to navigate, because if you just pull things up on YouTube at random, it can be a little bit annoying. But if you go in and you enter Rochester Mineralogical Symposium in the search window, you will see the logo come up in the search results. Just click on that. You'll get to the Rochester Mineralogical Symposium channel. In the middle, underneath that, you'll see playlists. Click there because everything is organized by year, and then it's very easy to go through and see what you'd like to watch. We are going to embark upon a project. Obviously, this year is going to be uploaded, but we are going to embark upon a project over the next while to preserve as many of the talks that we have recorded on the DVDs as possible. We're going to upload them onto YouTube. Of course, this depends on permissions, but I'm optimistic that people will be happy to know that these talks are going up online. And I'd also like to say that Jolyon at MINDAT has very graciously agreed that all of the program notes will be archived and indexed on MINDAT, and that project will also be ongoing later on this year. There's a possibility that the videos may also all be archived at MINDAT. So some great news on the preservation front, and I'm really happy with that. So I know it's tradition at the end of the Rochester Mineralogical Symposium for the chair to declare it closed. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to break with that tradition because I want the idea of the symposium to be taken into the future by all of us, and for us to continue to connect, especially across the different constituent groups in mineral world. And I put down a few events and thoughts about places that people may do that and ways people may do that. And I hope you will too. And I hope we'll all be able to continue to develop those friendships and relationships out in mineral world. I just want to say, you know, it's not always a great idea to leave before the very end of the credits, but it's time for thank yous. So I've heard Bill thank folks many times, and on his behalf, Steve's and mine, thank you. First of all, of course, to Jackie and Helen and Carolina, without whom the symposium couldn't have happened. To each and every featured speaker, to each and every technical session presenter and author, exhibitor, dealer, all the volunteers, every Rochester family member and participant of the symposium, thank you all. You've made it Rochester. I'm always scared of leaving people out. I've scoured, and I hope I've got the people who belong here to be thanked. Thanks especially, again, this year to John McAvan for helping out on the technical side. And I really thank you all. And I just have one more thing to talk about. You know, I really think the last talk at the Rochester Mineralogical Symposium has to end on a note which, you know, reflects the true Rochester Mineralogical Symposium and its spirit. We are no longer on the fourth floor here. And the morning after, George Thompson, dairy farmer, a longtime good friend, mineral collector, Rochester family member, has received this message on his tailgate that cows suck. Now, come on, people. There are many rumors. There's been no claim of responsibility, lots of denials. Yeah, look, we all know admission here involves pros and cons. The cons are pretty obvious. Defacing George's truck, offending George's cows. We all wish we'd done it, though. The pro is the admiration of all of us who wish we'd done it. I've put here a list of suspects. there could be others. We haven't had an admission, so this recording is not going to resolve this, but I sure hope to see something in the chat.